Hi, my name is Andries, and I have something to share with you regarding this coronavirus and how it shows up in the Asterix and Obelix comic. Okay, so just a brief overview of the storyline, and then we get right into it. In the beginning of this book, there's a Roman chariot that hits a pothole, and there's this complaint about Roman roads not being up to spec, and the senator using the funds of the state for orgies instead of, in other words, for parties, instead of for the fixing of the Roman roads. The senator is pushed from all sides, and he comes up with this marvelous plan that there will be a chariot race that showcases the excellent condition of the roads, and then the story starts developing. The senator now faces a new problem. He's got to organize a race. He goes home. He tells his wife, listen, no time for partying anymore. Now he's got to get to work. And as he gets onto his veranda or his porch, he has like this unplanned, off-the-record meeting with Julius Caesar, who tells him, listen, this is a great idea, this race of yours, but you've got to make sure that a Roman wins it, because Rome's prestige is at stake, and also the unity of the people of the peninsula, in other words, Italy. So then he sets out and organizes this chariot race, and it's open to all the nations of the world. They all come and compete in this race. And then we start getting into the scenes that are before us over here. Here they all start showing up for the race. Now that is a really abbreviated introduction so far. So here they start arriving, and here we are. I'm going to scroll down at this scene. Here is where Senator Bifidus now announces to the press this charioteer, coronavirus. And here is where it gets really interesting. So he announces, he says, here comes our favorite, straight from Rome, the champion with, it's basically this number translates to 1,462 victories. He says, with so many victories, the one they call the Masked Auriga, and he says the great coronavirus and his faithful Bacillus. Bacillus being the guy that's next to him. Okay, so why have a cartoon and write a whole book and publish it in October of 2017, and there's this character that is the main antagonist, as it were. Why call him coronavirus? Why not call him something else? Like, why didn't they call him something that is related to the reason why he's called 1462 victories? Why not something along that line? I'm going to first talk about the Masked Auriga. So he's wearing a mask. Now, what kind of mask is this? This is a very peculiar mask. You'll see that it looks like he has a massive grin on his face that just cannot be wiped off. Now that is our first clue, is this atomic grin. It's just like all over his face. I went and did a bit of research on masks. First I was thinking maybe this is a reference, possible reference to China, since coronavirus started in China. And I was looking up and down and couldn't find anything. When suddenly, lo and behold, here I found, let me just click on that, Phoenician, and you can put in here grinning masks and it'll show the same. These were known as such, Phoenician grinning masks, and I was looking at them and comparing them to what I found in the PDF in the Asterix and Obelix book. I thought to myself, well, this has got to be it. There's these, you know, the eyes are smiling as well. They are also pulled a bit. And then it's got these wrinkles on it. I'll show you just below here. On the next page, I have him again. And here is a close-up. This guy's smiling, and he's got this, these funny lines, these wrinkles, as it were, on his face, on the cheeks and over the eyes. And so, like I said, I found these masks, and very, very interestingly, I clicked on one of them, and it opened, this one over here, it opened to a very, very interesting article. I'll share that article with you now. I'd just like to show you a close-up. See, here's a close-up of one of these masks. You look at the grin of the the mouth is like wide open, and it's got these lines on the cheeks, over the cheeks, and it's got this sharp kind of sharp-ish nose, which is also very much like the one we saw in the cartoon. And then it's got lines on the eyes, just above the eyes on the forehead, and it's got these big ears. It's got these big ears. Now, not all of them have the big ears, but yeah, that is certainly a feature. Okay, so now the article. Here is that article that I clicked on, the one that had that mask on it. There it is, and it shares here. It as you can see here, also the sharp kind of nose here, the prominent nose. Here it says, in an ancient method of forced euthanasia, the disturbing truth behind a sardonic grin. And so these masks are connected with this sardonic grin. Now it explains what a sardonic grin is for those of you who are maybe not familiar with a sardonic grin. It talks about the Joker from DC Comics. It has this massive smile on his face. Ooh, this is a really terrible picture, but anyway, he looks really wicked over there. But then it goes onto this thing, this section here. It says, the sardonic grin dates back to the ancient world, as most things with intriguing backgrounds appear to do. It says, hemlock, a naturally occurring herb, usually associated with the forced suicide of the ancient Greek philosopher Socrates, plays a prominent role in the history of the creepy serial killer grin. So hemlock and this creepy grin have a history. So here it says, according to modern authors and ancient writers, a particular strand of the poisonous herb called water dropwort grows throughout the Mediterranean, but most commonly localized, so in other words, most commonly found on the island of Sardinia. And then it says here, it is from the location of the hemlock herb, Sardinia, that the eventual idiom sardonic grin stems. Okay, so now we still don't know what this hemlock does. Here it tells us, it says here, so what was the first instance in which the deadly hemlock was used? They say we can't tell, it's really impossible. He says, while the first answer is unknown, it has been discovered through archaeological research that hemlock has a long use in the toolbox of assassins and hired killers. One drop of the poisonous hemlock, water dropwort, was enough to completely incapacitate the target. So this is a poisonous herb that incapacitates you. And then it says the victim's muscles would grow taut, making it impossible to move, and the usually uncomfortable smile would spread across the victim's face. Because of the frozen musculature, the face would remain like that. Meanwhile, the assassin would complete his murderous job. So this herb it incapacitates you and it immobilizes you so that this assassin can do his or her work. So this is what this hemlock plant does to you. And here they say the victim's muscles would grow taut, and there is this uncomfortable smile that would spread across the victim's face as the muscles are pulling tighter and tighter. So here we go back to our little corona here, and we see Asterix and Obelix actually make remarks, that he says, oh, yeah, it's all about that Roman, and then Obelix says, yeah, well, what do you expect? He's got a nice smile. So the attention is drawn, or the reader is drawn to the smile. And then Asterix says, it's a mask, Obelix. So it's this smiling mask, and that's why I say it led me to the Phoenician grinning masks, and I just happened to click on the right one. Next it goes on to something that really ties very well into some of the other images that we will see in this Asterix and Obelix comic. It says here, the poisonous hemlock was also used for other less sadistic purposes, though in many ways still highly immoral. It says hemlock was employed by the Phoenicians of ancient Sardinia as a way to forcibly euthanize the elderly. And then they say, interpret that as you will. Obviously that refers to, this guy probably doesn't know anything about the Asterix and Obelix comic, but I find the choice of words just perfect. And then it says here, most often the herb was dropped in the drink of an elderly individual, and then when the effects of the poison took over, the person would be killed through varying methods. The most commonly reported from ancient records are deadly beatings, boulders to the head, etc. All the while the uncomfortable grin likely sent the illusion of gratitude to the euthanizers. Now here in the article it says, while the extent to which the hemlock was employed for the purposes of easing the deaths of the elderly is recorded, the opinion of the elders is left for debate. So they don't really know what the elders thought of all of this. It says here, the writers of the records were younger, so even the transcripts that remain, which might dictate the views of their elders, are likely tainted. It says here, did the elderly agree to this poisonous form of mercy killing? Could it even be called a mercy killing if these instances were in fact sneak attacks? Did it begin as a way by which younger family members could gain control of lands and money? And finally, if the tradition was widespread in Sardinia, was it a practice that was just accepted without argument by the populace as in each individual aged? Okay, so that's a lot to process and chew on, but try to keep in your mind what I've just shared with you. I want to show you something really interesting. Okay, so going back to Asterix and Obelix, here we have a virus, a masked Auriga, a masked charioteer, and we have just seen what this could possibly relate to. Now I want to share with you a bit of detail why I think this is speaking of euthanasia. Towards the beginning of the book, the first time we actually see our so-called heroes here, Asterix and Obelix, we see them in the marketplace and they have an elderly person with him. His name is Geriatrix, and he's walking around, he's in so much pain. So Asterix is helping him get to a tooth puller, and as they do so, Obelix gets distracted and they are waiting for him, and eventually they get to a tooth puller. And guess what his name is? Bioethics. Now, bioethics, sorry, let me just put this aside. Bioethics is the study of the ethical issues emerging from advances in biology and medicine. It is also moral discernment as it relates to medical policy and practice. Now, have a look at this. This person, let me just quickly scroll up. It says, bioethicists, euthanasia will save money and facilitate organ donations. This is just a random article that I found, but I like the opening paragraph here. It says, if you want to see what may soon go wrong, and let me just show you the date. He says soon go wrong. The date is March 16th, 2020. That's 10 days before our lockdown started here in South Africa. So he says, if you want to see what may soon go wrong in public policy, just read the professional literature. Bioethics journals are particularly illuminating in this regard, because many of the leading voices in the field long ago discarded the sanctity or equality of life model for the utilitarian quality of life ethic. So, and this grants higher value to some over others based on individuous distinctions such as disability, age, and health. This might be individual. Anyway, so this guy is basically saying, listen, long ago, the thinkers in this bioethical field have changed their paradigm. They have now adopted this utilitarian paradigm where they say, listen, if you basically don't serve a purpose in life anymore, you got to go. Now I want to show you the next article. This person writes and says, as coronavirus hits hospitals, the ugly specter of euthanasia raises its head. And it basically goes into the whole situation that they are faced with, that as hospitals become flooded with specifically older people and disabled people, but specifically older people, there is going to come a point where it's going to be a tough call. You let them have medical treatment and at the risk or at the cost of another life that you might save that's younger, or do you just euthanize them? So that's what this all goes into. And I found it really interesting that ASTERIX and OBELIX would take a individual with pain. He's already got pain. Now he's going to bioethics. And this is where I see this correlation. So you have older people, they have coronavirus, and they come into the hospital, they are already in so much pain. Now this bioethics thing, this moral decision that you have got to make, shall I let them live, try and save their lives, by spending all my energy exposing myself to the virus? They are hurting at the moment, they are in so much pain. Why not just put them out of their misery? And this is what happens here. You'll see this. So OBELIX is told here, go wander with dogmatics a bit. I'm going to take care of geriatrics. I know some of you might be like, oh, you're so into ASTERIX and OBELIX, but try for a moment and read this comic without this warm affection towards any of the characters. Just look at them all as actors trying to tell a story. They are all doing something that sends a message, and it's really hard to get an accurate picture of what that message may be if you always think that they're the good guys, etc. So that's just very important to note. Okay, so here he takes him to the dentist, and OBELIX goes and he's wandering around. I'll get to that detail in a later video. And here we have them coming back. It says a little while later, and then he says, ASTERIX says, you see, geriatrics, it wasn't all that bad. So there's this conviction or this statement made that, listen, it's not that bad. It's not that bad to put older people out of their misery. As we saw, this article here seemed to indicate that, listen, you know what? The thinkers have already left off this sanctity or equality of life model for a utilitarian quality of life ethic. So, and he says, if you want to see what may soon go wrong in public policy, this is what you're gonna have to look out for. So as this coronavirus thing develops, we will see this. We will see this come to the front, and some hard decisions are going to have to be made. And then geriatrics has this very interesting expression that he makes. He says, by Belanoff. Now throughout the book they have these moments where they use the names of the gods, and they say by Odin or by Tutatis or by Jin or whatever. And here he says by Belanoff. Now Belanoff, the name, I stumped Google trying to search for Belanoff euthanasia. When I typed that in, Google just told me, listen, it does not match with anything on the planet. I found that very curious because Google always has something to say. It always has an answer. So if you know anything about this Belanoff name and character, I know there's a lot of false information that is being spread on the internet about Bohemian Grove and this character on, I think it's Twitter or something, that tweets how they are, a flesh-eating club or whatever. All that, I watched a video of an elderly gentleman basically pointing out how that is all hoax and it's AI pictures or whatever. So I'm not I'm not really convinced that it's a legit, all those things are legit, but I'm still looking for good information on that. He says, by Belanov, I feel like a 16-year-old, but he obviously has got a tooth thing, so he's like, I feel like a 16-year-old. So he's like, yeah, he feels much better. So this is a really positive thing. He feels better. Why does he feel better? Because he's been euthanized. You see, he's been put out of his misery. The doctor said, he says, and plus, I'll get a new one. It was a milk tooth. Unless if he was lying through his teeth. Now, we know that dentists lie through their teeth, and they always tell you, no, it's not that bad, and it is that bad. So I just found this really, really interesting. The last thing that I want to show about this geriatrics and coronavirus, etc., is on page 13 again. So on page 13, right at the bottom of page 13, everybody's looking in, and ASTERIX and OBELIX, they're outside this crowd. Everybody in the crowd, they're looking coronavirus and admiring this champion. And he says, listen, it's time to sign up. Let's get back to the chariot quickly. And then OBELIX makes this remark. He's like, it looks a bit like the marketplace. So he looks at this scene above, where coronavirus makes its first appearance, and he refers back to the marketplace. Now, why does he do that? Coronavirus was said to have originated from a marketplace. So that's something really interesting there. I don't believe in coincidences, by the way. So he's pointed out as the masked origo. So we've treated that now in this video. Just to sum up, we've said, listen, okay, this mask represents a smile or a grinning. It's got this smile, this grin on it, as we saw on the page below. I've shown you the Phoenician grinning masks and the article where it talks a bit about how hemlock had one of the effects of hemlock was it made your muscles grow tight and then put this grin on your face. And it was shown also that one of the uses was to take care of the elderly in euthanizing them, forcibly euthanizing them. So this coronavirus is wearing a mask that resembles this grinning mask, and what I get from all of this is this virus will cause a forced euthanasia for the elderly, and the effects as shown here is that as in the ancient times, the ones making the decisions weren't the elderly. It was the younger generation that was making these decisions, and there's this moral conundrum that was presented in this thing. I'm going to stop this right here, and I will get you in the next video if you're willing to follow along. This is going to be a very long journey because there's a lot of detail that comes out in just that one image where coronavirus makes his first debut.